Chapter 7. Saturday, the 8th of October, 2016, 5:01 a.m., Riverport, Massachusetts, 2 minutes after library demolition. From inside the Riverport University Bearcat, Gibson watched fire crews roll up and start arcing water and retardant into what was left of the library.
Donnie, you there? Get the others. That second target is Chronon active. We're going hunting. We can't, boss. Hatch's priority 1 was to secure the lab. Choppers inbound to extract the core from this thing. We already got changed into a uniform.
A new voice came on the line.
Chronon 1, this is Monarch Actual. Standing orders are for radio silence. Clear the air. Chronon 1 to Monarch Actual. Keep your shirt on. We're encrypted. Clear the air, Gibson. I won't say it again. Though since you're on the line, you're wanted back at the tower. Immediately. Monarch Actual out.
Saturday, 8th of October, 2016, 5:23 a.m., Monarch Tower. Gibson took the elevator up to the top floor, back in his uniform, hands gripped behind his back to keep from punching the wall. That kid had escaped from him. That couldn't stand. 4 years hard training and fieldwork to get qualified with a Chronon rig, top of his game, best in class, and some jack-off undergrad gets dosed right and Gibson strategically withdrew. Ran is what he did, from the first Chronon active target he'd encountered in the field. 4 years waiting for a chance to flex his material, and who the fuck was this kid to look at him like that? I fucking Gibson like Gibson wasn't the meanest motherfucker in the whole Valley of Death. We'll get him, Donnie, he said to empty air, nodding. Take him apart like a chicken dinner. The elevator chimed and the doors hushed apart. Mr. Hatch's place always blew his mind. Polished mahogany floors and a view of the world that'll make anyone believe in God. Glass wall, glass ceiling, helipad just outside. Someone waiting to fly Mr. Hatch wherever, whenever. Years of good decisions. Mr. Hatch knew the shit. Clear head, crystal vision, smarts. Knew how to direct the people under him. Best commander Gibson had ever had, and the bastard had never been military. Mr. Gibson, Hatch smiled. Thank you for seeing me in so soon after the operation. Do you need to decompress? No, sir. I'm energized, sir. Present and clear. Excellent. Hatch gestured to one of the 2 Victorian leather club chairs positioned before his desk. Sit. Gibson did. Hatch didn't. Hatch didn't move from where he stood behind his desk. Hatch didn't say anything, just looked at Gibson, still smiling. Gibson cleared his throat. Nothing about Hatch changed. Sir, we first met in 2003, one of Monarch Security's first recruitment drives. Your dossier caught my eye, and I traveled to meet you personally in Baghdad. April 3rd, 2003. Yes, sir. The smile. Hatch just let that hang for a moment. Gibson reflexively swallowed. You've done things for this company that you will never be allowed to speak of. You are in possession of privileged information at the highest level. You understand the terror we face, and you're one of the very few who know of this company's relationship with our consultant. All these things you have earned. Your success rate is almost flawless, and you have a most peculiar gift for inspiring loyalty in those under your command. One of 112 candidates for the Chronon 1 program. 9 made it, and you are at the top of that list. You possess a unique psychology, Mr. Gibson, and a level of moral flexibility I find astounding. But I wonder, do you possess a holographic imagination? Still that smile. Are you able to construct a 3-dimensional image of a future form by actions you may choose to take in the present? Sir, it's one of the things that separates us from animals. The ability to delay gratification now for a likely greater reward later. The ability, for example, to choose to not pursue a grudge match against a total stranger, but instead follow orders and strive to keep alive a man critical to the ongoing survival of our species. But I interrupted you. Finish your thought. Sir, Gibson didn't like this. He had never imagined that one day Mr. Hatch might look at him like that. Now he was imagining all kinds of things. Like who he might be at the end of this interview. And suddenly, He couldn't get one thought to connect the next. Like a fucking chump. With respect, Mr. Hatch, I was assigned to oversee Guardian Squad sweeping clear. I left Donnie... No mind on Earth grasped chronon theory as well as Dr. William Joyce. Hatch moved to the front of his desk. You were tasked by me, explicitly, with keeping him alive. With keeping him out of the hands of our consultant. Paul Serene, I understand, but that, Hatch emphasized, is an excellent example of what I am talking about. Do you understand why we refer to Mr. Serene as our consultant? Paul Serene's primary role is to play the villain of our upcoming drama. In time, Monarch's role will be to play the rescuing hero. Therefore, Paul Serene, being tied to Monarch, will destroy our credibility with the governments of the world. Hatch took a measured step toward Gibson. That unquestioning trust is the pillar most essential to the success of Project Lifeboat. Unheard of technology must be delivered within a very short time frame. Technology requires development. That development will require unlimited funding, manpower, and intergovernmental cooperation, and it will have to happen very, very quickly. Time is quite literally running out, Mr. Gibson. Dr. Joyce's expertise will have bought us time, but now he is dead. Holographic, right. I got it. I'm removing you from command of Chronon 1, Mr. Gibson. Henceforth you'll be taking all your orders from Donnie. Sir! This close to the end, there's no room for second chances. You are in receipt of the last chance I will give you. Were you about to throw it in my face? Gibson said nothing. Hatch returned to face Riverport, screwed in an earpiece, and got back to work. Life escorted Randall Gibson to the door and closed it. Paul Serene was a man who lived in the space between moments, known to very few. In his too long seeming lifetime, he had learned many truths. He had built a diverse, multinational corporation in secret, from hiding, using skills and gifts unique to himself. He had met many extraordinary people, many of them terrible to know. That's how it had been for 17 long years, from the moment he first stepped into the time machine until now. All for this critical moment, for Project Lifeboat. Chronon particles are critical to the functioning of causality. No particles, no causality. No causality, no flow of events. And what is time but a linear flow of events? The activation of the Monarch-built time machine at Riverport University fractured the Myers-Joyce field, the field of chronon energy essential to the functioning of causality. Eventually, that fracture would cause chronon levels to drop disastrously low. The field would collapse, and time would end. The universe would become locked in a single moment, dividing infinitely. Because of him. Because of what he did. For 17 years, Paul Serene had lived with this knowledge. Paul Serene had killed the universe. He had but one chance to make amends for this great evil. Project Lifeboat would enable areas of the Earth to be shielded from the collapse of the MJ field. It would enable operatives to move freely about the planet in their quest to repair the field, to reseed chronon levels and thereby restart the flow of time and causality, freeing humanity from its coma. Then, there was the issue of the shifters, violent, non-Euclidean monstrosities indigenous to causality-free environments. Every single laboratory encounter with one had resulted in violent fatalities. Paul knew well enough what they were capable of. At the age of 28, he had spent what seemed an eternity hiding from them, bunkered down beneath floor panels, waiting for death at the end of time. The technology and the defensive capabilities required to protect the last and best of humanity from shifters would require development. Only 5 years remained. Development within that time frame was not possible without focus and assistance on a planetary scale. It required nothing less than humanity coming together, united by a desire to survive. That would require some doing. The threat would need to be seen as formidable. The solution is clear and simple and singular. All this spun through Paul Serene's head as he fought for consciousness. Many great people do not fear death or pain, But there is not a person alive who does not dread aloneness without hope or end. One night terror differed from another, but however it began, Paul was always choking on the acrid fumes of burning insulation and superheated long-chain polymers, the atmosphere that had filled that failing airlock. This thick mix coated his tongue, mucous membranes flavored themselves toxic, the drug taste dripping down the back of his throat as he retched and fought for breath. A knocking sound always accompanied the initial suffocation, a dull pounding against the wall Paul could never find, and Jack's voice calling his name from very far away. Paul always panicked. He would run for the voice but never found a way out of the smoke and back to the real world. He always knew what would happen next, and always wished that the smoke would kill him first. Paul knew what it was to be buried alive in a moment without an end, to feel his psyche crushed like a shell of spun sugar. He knew the killing fear all humans are susceptible to, and yet his fear of the monstrous thing that knew his name, that had stalked him across time, dwarfed even that. It was here, now. He could hear it in the smoke. Often there would be years between encounters, but each time they met, the thing got closer. It howled from within Paul's head. Infinite potential futures split and bloomed before him, endless corridors spraying in infinite directions. He chose one and fled down as easily as a frightened child runs to their parents' bedroom. The campus. The burned library. Jack had Paul's gun. The dull chrome .45 Paul had picked up years before. A gift from the widow of a Russian warlord, one of Paul's zealots. In this future, Paul had no seizure. In this future, he flicked the pistol from Jack's grip, sent it spinning into darkness. Jack's eyes widened with terror, a fear that had nothing to do with Paul. The monstrosity was there, as always, the thing with the killing light in its palm. It strode from the flames of the library's ruin. Panic rising, Paul focused on Jack as a means of escape, saw 100 futures split off the main, chose one, and dived. The scene split, clone images separating, and then the present coalesced. There was no escape. In this future, Jack was gone, and Paul found the thing waiting, as always. It howled. Nothing living sounded like that. Nothing. It was a howl from within his head, not without. Bestial, fractal, glittering, and hideous, it swung for his face. The palm of its killing paw shone like a star. Saturday, 8th of October, 2016, 5:50 a.m., Riverport, Massachusetts, Monarch Tower. Paul woke, gasping, the straps of the breather biting into his face. Paul? The smoke was gone. He sat upright in a narrow steel-framed bed, rubber straps straining as he pulled the mask from his face. Her hands were on his shoulders. The sharp taste of the chronon-rich formulation filled his mouth, lungs, body, settling the seizure. His cells felt intact and reliable. He was alive. He knew this bright room. Her laboratory. He was home. Paul? Sophia, kind, worried eyes and gentle-faced. He relaxed. The panicked animal beside him receded. They weren't alone. Martin Hatch was there, patient hands clasped at his waist, dark-suited and unforthcoming, saying nothing before it served a purpose. Martin had been with Paul from the beginning. It was with this man, in this town, that the idea of Monarch had been formulated. Martin was the face and CEO of Monarch Solutions, the umbrella company and global force that allowed Paul to quickly and easily assemble the technology and talent to do what the survival of the species required. A company rapidly built by capitalizing on Paul's powers and knowledge of the future. Martin received Paul's glance and returned to acknowledging the nod of the head. "You're fine," the movement said. "We have been here before. I am with you." Paul breathed out, the straps snapping free. "Jack, where is he?" "When Talon Squad located you, you were alone," Hatch said, that voice as strong as the cornerstone of any parliament. "A city-wide to be on the lookout has been issued for Mr. Joyce." "Regular police can't—" "I know. I put Chronon 1 on it." "Paul," Sophia interjected. The debrief can wait. How are you feeling?
How long was I gone?
Not long. Less than an hour this time. These episodes were becoming more frequent. He examined his left hand, luminescence beneath the sleeve of his tunic. Sitting up and removing his shirt and gloves, he examined the spread of the sickness. Sophia was racing to understand an illness that put Paul beyond the help of physical medicine. 6 years ago, the flesh of his left arm had been transformed, fractal and flickering, the first and most powerful sign of the spreading metamorphosis. Since then, it had spread past his elbow, reaching for his vitals. Sophia told him of the inroads it was making. Beneath the surface of his skin, fingers of bright corruption reaching upward to touch the underside of his brain. He was shuddering. Thoughts of that thing were still in his head, its massive and distorted frame flickering between states. The hideous head scream, the desire to make Paul one of them, to take away the mind he had jealously safeguarded for so long, to claim him with the light of that shining palm. The seizure he had experienced at the library while fighting Jack was the illness's latest attempt to wrest control of Paul once and for all. Paul's mind remained his own, for now, but the infection had claimed another inch of his arm.
I don't have long.
Saying it felt like an admission of death.
The visions, my reconnoitering of possible futures, they're narrowing.
Sophia took his hand, the sick one, without concern. I've made good progress toward the cure. We will keep administering these treatments to keep the symptoms in check.
The time frame of your visions have been growing shorter, Hatch said, at a concerning rate. I've never been present in any vision beyond October 10th, 2016. We knew this would come.
Sophia's face grew dark, throwing an accusing look at Hatch.
I won't listen to this.
Paul had to stay alive long enough to see the world saved. If he died with Lifeboat's future uncertain, then the world died with him. Sophia's touch was the one real, selfish comfort he permitted himself in 17 years, but only because it served a higher purpose. She healed, better than anyone was ever able to. She healed, but she could not cure. Paul swung his legs off the gurney. There was a chamber at the far side of the small lab. It resembled a glass cube, hairy with connections to banks of monitoring equipments, boxed in by a 4-point stutter generation field. Inside the stutter contained within that glass box was one of the creatures Sophia had classified in non-formal nomenclature as shifters. It was a being similar to the Shining Palm, but smaller in size. The stutter chamber was powered by chronon energy flowing directly from the regulator, the source of near-limitless energy at the heart of Monarch Tower. The regulator was the very core of Project Lifeboat, housed in a sealed chamber adjacent to Paul's quarters on the 49th floor. What a boon to humanity the regulator could be if only they could understand how it worked. He cursed William for his pride and turned his attention to the creature in the chamber. At one time, not long ago, the thrashing thing in the glass box had been known as Dr. Kim. Thing, singular, not strictly accurate. Kim's role had been to unlock the regulator's secrets, to better harness its potential for Project Lifeboat, and the overeager fool had gone too far. One mistake, a slip of the hand, and he had ceased to be Kim at all, transformed by the complex interaction of gravity, probability, and causality occurring within the heart of the regulator. Sophia had been told the device was the creation of Kim himself, a story the little man had been more than happy to play along with. But it was far from the truth. Because of his error, Dr. Kim now existed in a state of quantum superposition. Moment to moment, his form settled upon one configuration, then manifested as another. The eye could not rest. Detail could not be grasped. The Kim shifter was a being of pure rage, thrashing against boundaries it could never escape. Shifters manifested only within chronon-free areas, spaces in which probability and causality had ceased to function. Place a probability generator such as a human within their habitat, and shifters became incredibly violent. Sophia hypothesized that a shifter's natural state was placid, but exposure to potential was agonizing. driving them to destroy the source of pain. Dr. Kim had been human. Paul himself was being colonized by a condition similar to Dr. Kim's. Therefore, Sophia concluded shifters had once been human. Examining Kim's state of superposition, she believed he now existed not as a Dr. Kim, but as all possible Dr. Kims. The shifter in the chamber was form and reality at war with themselves. This, she concluded, meant that shifters were beings that existed outside and all across all times, living in the spaces between the moments, four-dimensionally. The Kim shifter existed. The Kim shifter would exist. The Kim shifter had always existed, even before the moment Dr. Kim became a shifter. The thing had long ago given up attempting to attack its cage. Now it existed in a state of perpetual thrashing frenzy, a dozen versions of itself half perceptible from moment to moment. Paul had come to think of its layered, multitudinous shrieks as the sound of utter hatred. "Martin," Sophia said, "cover that, please." She nodded to Paul in his clear distress. "He had been like that from the moment he transformed," Hatch said, pulling a black cloth about the chamber. "Where does he get the energy?" The cloth did nothing to keep the hate sound from Paul's mind. "He chose his fate," Paul said, more to comfort himself than anything else. "One of him did," Sophia replied. "The multitude he has become did not, and I suspect they hate him for it." Sophia went back to finishing her ministrations. "It is not a fitting fate for a man who may have saved all of humanity. The regulator was his gift to us. Without it, you have no way of sidestepping the end of all things. Lifeboat would be nothing." Paul was just as important to the project as the regulator, and Kim knew it. That's why the man had locked himself inside the stutter chamber before the transformation had taken full hold, to provide a fully infected patient ready to be studied, and to help find a cure for Paul's condition. Sophia may not have found a cure, but the treatment she had developed through studying the Kim shifter had bought Paul enough time to lay the groundwork for Project Lifeboat. Paul crossed the room. One wall was entirely glass, looking down upon a glass-roofed farm of laboratories, each one staffed by men and women at the peak of their field. Many of them in that moment would be working to find ways to save Paul. Pointless, but he couldn't tell Sophia that. He need only survive a day or two more. That was all that mattered. Then the process required to make Lifeboat a reality would succeed. The flesh of his arm ached. "I can't become like them," he said, as much to himself as anyone. "That kind of madness, trapped between moments, forever." "Paul," she said, "that is not your fate." "I'll kill myself first." "That's not what I meant." "They want me with them, Sophia. When they howl, it's a pull like nothing I've ever felt. When I dream of them, it's like coming home." "You make it sound like something you want." "What if, as the sickness spreads, my mind becomes infirm? In a moment of weakness, I could surrender humanity's every future." Paul took her hands in his. "I need just a few more days. Give me that." "I do not tend corpses," she said. "You will live, but I will do as you ask. For the next few days." She laid one hand against his face. "In that time, don't be stupid." Hatch cleared his throat. Paul glanced at him. "Yes, Martin. We need to debrief." Paul gently touched Sophia's face, kissed her forehead. "Be rested for the gala tonight. Seduce the world for me, Sophia. I want you and Martin to leave them gasping. I'll be watching from my quarters." "And afterward?" "Just you and me. Then, Martin, this way." Paul directed his CEO into a free medical bay. Sophia's lab was secure on the top floor, close to Martin's office and away from the eyes of the rest of the tower. Paul's association with Monarch, despite being its unofficial founder, was strictly off the record. He never even walked the mezzanines. "You say you've assigned Chronon 1 to bring in Jack," Paul said. "That's right." Paul dragged one palm down his sweating face to work the ache out of his jaw. "Chronon 1 had him once. Randall Gibson had him once. I demoted him and placed Donnie in charge." Paul was surprised. "Gibson's your boy, Martin. You've cleaned a lot of dirt from his knees over the years. I expected rationales from you, not a spanking.
In his defense, Randall was under-equipped. Jack is chronon active. That was unexpected.
Martin let that hang for a moment, perhaps pointedly.
He informs me that Joyce woke and gave him the slip.
You doubt the report?
Randall's instinct for self-preservation is a primary trait,
as is his unpredictability.
It's the cost of an adaptable operative who possesses wide-spectrum moral flexibility, zero hesitation, and the mental fortitude for stutter operations. His success rate remains in the second percentile. In terms of cost-benefit, the man remains an asset.
So, now that the university is done, what's the temperature outside?
Hatch shifted his weight a touch, strained his shoulders. Almost everything went exactly as you said it would.
Paul took a second and slowed his subjective relationship to the moment, focusing on Martin. He watched potential futures radiate off the man four-dimensionally. He isolated his awareness of these potential causality streams and focused instead on streams already expiring. Paul's awareness scanned through this fading back catalog, locating the inbound path that had led to the particular moment they now inhabited, and traced it backwards. This backward path was already weak and fading, becoming fainter as each passing second took Paul farther away from the present. Paul seized upon it, allowed his perception to inhabit that now extinct possible past, and looked around as quickly as he could. Martin in his office 87 minutes prior, the black glass surface of his smart desk channeled the voice of Talon Squad's senior operative.
Stage 1 complete, sir. All witnesses detained. How many? 13. They've seen what we needed them to see.
Martin digested this.
13 is manageable. Sir?
Martin Hatch radiated a certain density of potential, a daisy head of deeply consequential paths streaming from him. What he said next would determine the shape of the future, the success or failure, potentially, of everything Paul had worked for.
Release 3, then exercise the hardline option immediately. Civilians and law enforcement are contained, but not for much longer. You have 60 seconds. Yes, sir. Talon out.
Hatch heard gunfire before the line had even cut. The daisy had withered, untaken paths already dusting out and being left behind as Martin Hatch walked Monarch into a future where they murdered 10 college students on campus. The flow of time dragged Paul away from other futures, looking forward. Paul saw how the path Martin had taken them down would require cover-ups, raise questions, spawn suspicion, and require a retasking of manpower to smooth things over. Why had Monarch personnel cordoned the university? How could a private security outfit mandate the Riverport Police Department, who may and may not enter an active crime scene? Why was Monarch dealing with the shooters? But it was all covered in their contract with the city, and events would progress fast enough that it would never go to court. He saw the media explode with speculation about peace. Who were they, and why had they targeted the quantum physics building? He caught glimpses of Monarch revealing what had been inside that lab, the perfect way to prime the public for what Martin would reveal at tomorrow night's gala. This had been the right move. Behind him, Paul watched a dozen lesser causality paths die. Paul disengaged and rubber-banded back into the present.
We made an impression, Hatch was saying. The correct witness escaped. The remainder were neutralized on sight. And the narrative in the media is that it was an act of domestic terrorism. There's good footage of a helicopter airlifting the time core free of the quantum physics building.
Great. That primes the audience for our second act involvement. We're in good shape.
Your decision to prematurely demolish the library, however,
was accounted for in the pre-planning. It conforms the narrative of an extremist attack on the physics building. As an individual, Martin Hatch possessed minimal need for expression. The flex of thumb atop his clasped hands and his level gaze exuded tolerance.
Is it possible that you simply could not bring yourself to shoot a family friend?
Martin knew him better than anyone, but even so, Paul found the thought of having lost a moment of control over his own transparency unsettling. 17 years, and here we are, on the eve of our work coming to fruition, and you're questioning my capability to place our mission first?
I never supported the elimination of William Joyce. Our best have striven for years to understand the regulator. Dr. Joyce could have enlightened us in an afternoon.
He resided on the correct side of your cost-benefit analysis. Yes, I understand.
6 years. That's how long I've debated Dr. Joyce with you.
You could have brought him in, interrogated him, and leaned. You and I will never know how far it could have taken this company. I helmed Project Promenade for 3 years before I finally went through the machine. In that time, William was a consultant and troubleshooter only. He was never hauled off for questioning. It never happened, so it could never happen. Time is a closed loop. Nothing changes. I know. I've tried. The regulator could have been our Rosetta Stone. It may have saved us come the end. Hatch composed himself. This kind of outburst was out of character for him. There is nothing more to be said. Kim is gone, and now so is Joyce. These bullet points were recited, verbatim from the last time they had a similar conversation. Will had the knowledge and power to interfere. We're too close to 0 hour. The risk he presented was unacceptable. Hatch maintained his usual countenance. Convince me that sentimentality will not play a role in your handling of Jack Joyce. We've tried and failed for years to replicate my abilities. Jack survived where we failed. He's valuable. That is irrelevant this late in the game. Replicating the powers Jack and I share sans my ailment would lessen lifeboats dependent on chronon storage and rescue rigs, thereby increasing the viability of end-of-time travel. William's interferences would have been inconvenient. By contrast, the actions of a chronon-active insurgent such as Jack, in pursuit of a vendetta, could derail. Martin, Paul looked his friend in the eye. You are monarch. The blood of 10 people is on your hands. Mine are pledged into an ocean of it. No single life is worth the life of all that had been, all that is, and that all might one day be. When it comes to Jack, I won't hesitate. But for now, he resides on the correct side of my own cost-benefit analysis. Martin held his gaze. That was enough. I chose you to be the man to safeguard humanity through this most terrible hour. Your diligence now only reaffirms my confidence. Martin inclined his head, in acceptance and leave talking. He did not accept the rationale or the flattery. Without another word, he exited, the conversation over. Paul's hand went to the talisman that hung around his neck. On a thin woven chain, Ori trigger Aberfoyle's bullet. A reminder that time cannot be taken for granted, and that eventually it runs out. For everyone.